Our first guest is Edwin Atkins. He has more than 35 major feature motion picture credits as production manager or producer, including Clear and Present Danger, Highlander 1, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Sliver, The Long Walk Home, and The Big Easy. Let's give a Grady welcome to Edwin Atkins.
Thank you. My mic is on? Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be here. And I want to show you a few slides and give you some of my wisdom. My legacy today started as my father was a graduate of UGA. And little did I know that after 35 films, I'd be in Athens today and speaking to UGA future filmmakers. I was a transplant from Atlanta to Maryland at the age of 3. And I got my movie bug, my first experience, after my senior year at East Tennessee State University in a movie called Walk in the Spring Rain. I was an extra eating a hot dog, but I never forgot the passion and the strong desire and the determination. And that would put me in Maryland and New York and Hollywood and now Georgia. So that was my journey. But this is going to be your journey. And what you're going to remember at the end of your career is the journey that you took. So make it a good one, okay? My production experience began in college, and I produced an outdoor drama about the founding of Maryland called Wings of the Morning. There was a movie called Voyage of the Mayflower that needed square rigger, tall ships, and couldn't find them. So since I had two ships that were in my production, they came down to Southern Maryland to use them. In addition to the 2 ships, I also cast Denzel Washington in his first paid role, who was in my play. And so that kind of sealed the deal that I was the guy to talk to. I became an expert location manager, and I made a lot of money, and I had a lot of opportunities. But this is one of the most important things I can tell you today, is that when your experience, mine was all college production, but when your experience meets with opportunity, when they intersect, that's the key to success. And if you can define that moment, which is tough, but that's what you're looking for. Because I was a big fish in a small pond. But when I took my opportunity, when the big doors opened, the little ones had to close. And you have to make a commitment. And that's the key. So how are you going to know when your opportunity comes, okay? Well, maybe you're tired of working for free, okay? It won't be easy, but you'll find it. You need to create a reputation, okay? I used an identifiable name, Itsi. There was only one Itsi in the biz. It was an identifiable name that I used. I secured locations at the top of the Statue of Liberty for Remo Williams. Great stunt work during Highlander and rooftops over New York. I garnished praise from directors like Robert Wise and studio execs and producers. But again, you've got to find your opportunity. And like I said, it won't be easy. You might be lonely, and you can't go back. But don't give up. You know, you're in Atlanta, one of the major production areas now. You got to make that work for you. You got to create your own good luck, and you got to work it. You know, create a niche, maybe, a location manager for universities, cover all the universities, a nursing home. Or like in the New York Times, the local papers disappear and student journalists fill the void. You can be great news reporters, and this is an opportunity. You got decisions that you're going to have to make, like define your goals. You want to be in front of the camera, behind it. You want to do features, ads, TV, documentaries, animation. You want to stay at home with your girlfriend and your dog and your family, or you want to go on the road. You know, the motion picture industry is a small city, The jobs range from catering and accounting and camera and grips and agents to hundreds of occupations. But you've got to start early in making those decisions. And we can't all be directors, and we can't all be producers, okay? So don't reach too high too quick. You've got to go up the ladder, okay? You've got to earn your way up. Because, you know, the people that you work with on the way up, those are going to be the same people that you see on the way down. And it's a team effort, okay? So how many of you guys have phones that will make a video? Okay. Well, I figured that. So there's all these potential filmmakers. And I hope you can use them for more than talking on phones and taking selfies, okay? Maybe you could make a video or a digital. You know, you don't make films. This is film. And you don't make videos anymore, okay? You make something I'm calling a digital, okay? So use those digitals. Create a motion picture, a moving picture, a motion picture. Everything moves. The actors move, the cameras move, the editing moves. And each frame motivates the next frame. And if it doesn't move, it doesn't belong in a motion picture. Just remember that when you're shooting. Everything's got to move. Your digital that you're making could be your dreams, your experiences, and a great calling card to send out to people that you want to get to know. You know, a business card, a nice little digital. Your dreams, your goals, your desires. And I got to tell you, your second job, it's the hardest. Your first job, you could get for relationships, you get for a lot of different reasons. But that second job is about your accomplishments, about your skills, about your personality and your contacts. So in conclusion, I want to say that people like Robert Wise and Taylor Hackford, who you're going to hear from tonight, and Hawk Koch and Robert Evans, it was a long climb up that ladder. But when I moved to Paramount and walked through those gates, that was the pinnacle of my success, okay? That was my advanced degree. That was my PhD. And there's no reason why you can't do the same thing. And that's what I want to leave you with, is 3 Ps: passion, persistence, and professionalism. You get those, and you can figure out when opportunity and experience intersect, you're going to make it, okay? So since it's October, and I gave you a lot of my credits, there's one credit that I wanted to tell you. I created the first haunted house in America. Before 1971, there were just trailer trucks with air and grapes, but I took a big old mansion, hired a lot of students from a university just like you, put them in there, and I changed theater. Instead of sitting in a permanent audience and watching sets move, I made the sets permanent and the audience move through. So you went through. You didn't sit in a chair. You walked through this theater of the macabre, and it was very successful for 10 years. It also created a spin-off of many, many different ones. One of them, the Washington Post calls me the Prince of Fright. It went to New York. There's a Blood Manor in New York, which I sold my name to, the rights for it. But there's the founder, one of the founders of the industry, Huddleston, Kaylee Huddleston, is she here?
Yeah,
Anyway,
Kelly, I don't think she is.
She is. Well, she had a couple quotes that I think really, really do work as part of this presentation. If you keep your eye on the prize, you can touch the sky. There's no point in talking about what you've done. It's all about what you're going to do. Do not let anything stop you, including yourself. Just keep pushing. You can do it. And focus on the short goals, because these short goals will eventually become your long-term goals. So you can reach me on Facebook at the Georgia Film Locations and Festivals. My email is available. And how are we doing on time?
Actually doing pretty well.
Okay, well, I wanted to tell you that the location manager, which is where I started, I didn't go up carrying coffee or being a PA. I had 10 years of theater. So I moved right from theater, which is very close, casting, all the elements of production that we do in theater, we did in film. So I just transitioned over. to the location manager, which is the second most important job. And I think the hardest. I really tell you it's the hardest. And there was an HBO special that documented best of the movie makers, and I was included in that. And in that special, this was my quote: "We're first-class gypsies. We come to your town, we set up shop, and we go home. What I do as the location manager is bridge all this together, finding all the locations, making all the deals. And we have to have the cooperation from everybody. And that's the difference between success and failure. Because the director doesn't care whether the mayor's daughter is not happy because she didn't get a job, or the locations are going down south, or whatever. The location manager has got to keep the community tight, keep it happy, make the deals, and make it turnkey so that when the film comes in, everything works. And that's not an easy job. Now, we're going to talk about Long Walk Home tonight. One thing that Long Walk Home did for me was that I made a deal with Apple. I want an Apple Classic. You remember the old? I want one on every desk in the production office. I want custom software where we can take all the extras in Long Walk Home, and there's hundreds of them, and we can bring them out by age and race and wardrobe and production vehicles. And we need 30 blacks that own period cars, that have winter wardrobe, that are in this age. We could pull that out. And boy, did it save a lot of money and a lot of time. And we were the first production that we know of that actually used computers in the production office on location. Now, there were plenty of computers in Hollywood, but we took it out into the community and did it. And I just want you to think how we made movies before computers and cell phones, because that's what I did. Lots of quarters for the payphones, and lots of trees were used for paper. And it was, look, it goes all the way back to the early days. How did they make movies in the 20s? Have you ever seen the grips that have a scarf around their neck? It's kind of a classic, the grip's got a scarf. Well, that was his walkie-talkie. He took it off and he waved it, and it went down the line, and that meant bring in the extras. And those different colored kerchiefs meant different things. That was the first walkie-talkies. So now you have got digitals, you've got phones, you've got great teacher, great education opportunities. So I'm expecting you to do great things, and so is this school. So don't let us down. Long Walk Home, a drama that proclaims that racial equality cannot be eased into effortlessly. It requires the rigor of change and commitment. Well, that's true about what you're going to do. But at a time in America when everyone did what was expected, there were two women that had the courage to do what was right. And I think that applies today. If we can look at what we should do and get the courage to speak it and do it, we could go through a lot of this problems that we're facing today. And this movie portrays that in a very important way with civil rights. So,
well, Ed, thanks so much for that wonderful overview. I'd love to show the trailer here, or the,
okay,
the synopsis of
please,
it if we can.
Please.
Modern civil rights movement has benefited all society. Yet it's easy to forget the road to social change is paved with sacrifices made by individuals.
I'm tired of hanging my head in the shadow of crackers. I want to ride the front of the bus.
Rosa Parks was the catalyst that helped the US civil rights movement change gears. Racial segregation was clearly on the way out when Martin Luther King announced a boycott of segregated bus services in Montgomery, Alabama.
We are therefore asking every Negro to stay off the buses Monday in protest of the arrest and trial.
This is where we pick up the story of one individual, Odessa, played by Whoopi Goldberg, in The Long Walk Home. She works as a maid for a white family. Society forces her to sit at the back of the bus, just one part of the discrimination she faces on a daily basis. Odessa supports Montgomery's bus boycott, even if it means walking from one side of town to the other. Her employer, Miriam, played by Sissy Spacek, secretly offers Odessa the occasional lift to work, finding herself torn between obeying her husband and doing what she knows is right.
It's like a dog knowing a cat. It's a different species. And you driving her to work is telling her that she's just like us, and she's not, and she never can be.
Whoopi puts in an impassioned performance in The Long Walk Home. The following year, she would win an Oscar and a Golden Globe for her supporting role in Ghost, but was largely critically ignored in this leading role.
I'm a little scared.
We're all scared. What's scaring you, Miss Thompson? Who you are, who Mr. Thompson wants you to be.
You might fail to see how relevant The Long Walk Home is to us. But change starts by identifying our own fears and prejudices. By highlighting one person's journey of self-sacrifice, The Long Walk Home sheds light on what it takes to make the world a better place.
Well, with that overview, I'd like to share this wonderful quotation from some of the press at the time. Do you want to read it?
Well, this is Dr. King's wife. She loved it. You know, this was a quote from her, Coretta Scott King. Recommend this important film to everyone. Would be a better understanding of how the Montgomery bus boycott impacted the lives of black and white Americans. And a lot of what's in this movie applies to today. It is still relevant after 30 years.
Tell us a little bit about some of the production challenges you faced in...
Well, first of all, we needed 3 buses that were 1955. That wasn't easy to find. One was in Fort Gordon, one was in Texas. We had to bring these buses in, have them repainted, redecorated, and of course you need 2 or 3 buses. You need one bus that's mechanical, that's going to run. You need one bus that is going to be towed, so it's the towing bus. And it doesn't, and then you need a backup in case the mechanical bus breaks down or you're just shooting interior shots that aren't moving. Same thing with her car, that Woody. We had to find 3 of those and have them all matched. The extras were quite a problem, and not a problem, they were spectacular. These were all local Montgomery people who had lived. Many of them had lived through this 1955 bus boycott. And they were doing it not for their $35. They were doing it because they lived it. And they wanted to be sure that it was told properly. And it was July when they were in that hot wool, heavy coats in the parking lot.
Wow.
And it was hot, but boy, they stuck with us. They didn't leave. We used an old mall. I mean, this was only like a $6 million movie in 40 days of shooting. This is a low-budget movie. And as Taylor will tell you, this was a student script picked up at USC. And I picked this movie to talk to you about because this is a kind of movie that's a challenge that you could actually do. You know, a low budget, developed into a school, picked up by a producer outside, created on a low budget, but with an impact that still remains relevant after 30 years.
Now you spread out some of the materials for the film. Do you want to just say a little bit about what's there?
I'll just walk over here. This is the production board, the strip board, which I'm sure you guys all know about in production class, but it is the architecture of the film. Every single scene, who's in it, what's needed, what props, what's talent. This is about our computers. This is a timeline of the history. These are the call sheets. The call sheet is the daily assignment of what's going to happen that day, who's in it, everything that's needed, and the advance, and what happens if it rains, where we go, and all of that, and who gets picked up and in what van. The call sheets, the daily production reports are obviously the document after we shoot. This says how much film we shot, who showed up, how long it was, everything about it, which goes to the studio. And then every actor has to sign out because his hours are predicated and turnaround and all these other SAG, so they have to sign out. And Whoopi, being Whoopi, would not sign her name. She used Claude Rain, she used Mae West, she used all these fictitious names just to give me a headache. But anyway, and this is the Bible, the script. You'll notice the script is all white. But believe me, when you shoot, it's going to look like this. Every page is a different color. Now why? Because every change that's made, even the smallest, has to be reprinted and put in a color. And every change is a different color. Now why is that important? Because look, the grip, the prop guy, if he's not told that on this day there was a change, and he doesn't have the prop there, it's not his fault. It's production, because he did not get an updated script with the proper color. So, and there's not a white page left in it. Everything was changed. This is the storyboards, which are very important in action sequences. This is the storyboards from the big encounter in the parking lot, where they were stood up against the white mob. And this is a breakdown sheet. Everything that's on those strips is on here. And you break down each scene first before you put it into the strip. These are some of Taylor's credits. His newest movie, The Conversation with De Niro, is a riot. Everybody's All-American, you know. He's married to Helen Mirren, and they did a Long Ranch, a movie that's just come out, which is very interesting. These are some stills from the movie. So
you must have, in other words, a pretty full attic then, or a full
attic.
garage.
I'd love to give it to the university. I got 50 boxes of paper. I've got Long Walk Home. I've got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. You know, I've got all of it. And I'm at an age where I just need to get rid of it. And Parker gave me a Georgia hat. So not only do I have a father that was here, now I got a hat. And I sure hope your team does a little better this week.
I think we all do. I think we all do. Well, thanks again for that wonderful overview and things. And let's see if we can get
Let's enjoy Taylor.
on.
He is a top. You don't get any better than Taylor Hackford.
Here we go.
I haven't seen him in a good while.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that's great then.
He's probably got more gray hair than I do. I don't know. There he is.
Hello.
Hey.
Taylor, how are you? Jay Hamilton here too.
And Itzy's here.
Hey, Itz, how are you?
Good, I'm good. I was just
Hi, James.
How are you?
I'm good. So,
Let me
are
show you a
ready?
little picture of our crowd that we got here. I got a cam
Great.
that I can kind of swap.
Hey, folks. God, what a big crowd.
Yeah, and these are all film majors, most of them.
Great.
You know, the next generation of some good movies might come out of this crowd.
So we were just talking about The Long Walk Home, and Itzy was giving us some a little bit of background on it. I just wonder if you had any nuggets of memories that you have about that shoot.
Definitely. Have they seen the film?
We showed a synopsis of it, but I don't know how many have seen the full film.
We showed a 6-minute clip about it, you know.
Well, a number of years ago, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a film director, and after a bad experience on my second film, my first film I had two good producers who were really helpful and very collaborative. But on my second film I had a son of a pardon me, as a producer who really didn't back me or help me, and actually I think hurt the film. So I made up my mind from that point on that I wanted to be involved in producing the films. And once I did, I produced several films, and then I decided that I would try to develop material, smaller films than I would normally do, develop material for films, independent films, or films that I would make as a producer. So the first project I did was a film called La Bamba, which was about the life of Richie Valens, who was a Chicano who had a #1 song, La Bamba, that song which you probably all have heard. And I did that film, and it was very successful. In fact, the thing that's bizarre, and because there's been a huge, it's probably been 30 years since I produced that movie, it's still the highest grossing film about the Latino subjects in the history of Hollywood. And there should have been many, many more since then, but there haven't been, which is a statement in itself. But anyway, I did that, and then at a certain point, I got maybe too big for my britches, and I decided I wanted to start my own little studio. So that's where Long Walk Home comes in, because I got some financing and started this company, New Visions. And when that happens, and for all of you as filmmakers, you know, lifeblood of filmmaking is development. Development is when you take a piece of material, whether it be a novel or an article from a newspaper or an original idea that from a writer's mind, and you try to develop that into a script, because you can never make a film without a script. So the script is the bedrock foundation of any project. I started this company, and I was going to make 5 movies a year that I was going to produce, not direct. And so you all of a sudden need more material, and you have to develop some of that. You know, some of it comes to you in a script that has already been written. Some of it, you have to hire a writer, you have an idea, or you want an adaptation done, and you get that writer to hopefully do a good script that you can now produce. The Long Walk Home was a script that came to me from a friend named Dave Bell, who had made educational films in Los Angeles. I'd known him when I started in public television. You all have to start somewhere. And you get out of school here, you're going to try to find a job in the industry. And that job could be any number of different things. You know, but most likely it'll be a thing called, and I use quotation marks, a gopher. In the movie business, you're a gopher. You go for things for people. I hate to tell you, I'm sure you feel you're going to graduate and immediately go right into making your own independent films. I hope you do, but I'll bet you won't, because you're going to need some experience. And anyway, what happens is that when I started in a public television station in the mail room delivering mail. I didn't go to film school, so I couldn't present them with my certificate. I had majored in economics and international relations, and I was in the Peace Corps. So when I came back from the Peace Corps, I thought I was going to go to law school. I'd gotten the bug for filmmaking while I was in South America, in Bolivia. And I came back and went to law school for 2 weeks. And I said, this is not what I want to do. I can do it, but this is not it. So I got up and I walked out of law school having forfeited my tuition. And the only thing I could do is go to work. And I went to work, and I tried to find something that was as close to filmmaking as possible, where I could make some sort of salary, because I had a wife and she was pregnant. So I went to work in this mailroom delivering mail, and hope that I could make some contacts there to work my way out of the mailroom. Meanwhile, at night I had Super 8 camera, and I was making films of my own and cutting them together and doing that while I was working during the day in the mailroom. While I was there, I met some educational filmmakers, and this guy Dave Bell was successful. I did some grip work for him and some gopher work for him. And later, when I had been successful as a filmmaker and now had my own little studio, he called to me and he said, hey, I've got this script called The Long Walk Home. It was written by a screenwriter who lived it. His mother was the person in the story. And this was all about back in Montgomery, Alabama, with the desegregation of the buses, the bus system. And this is, thank God we've gone a long way past this. But in that era, Rosa Parks was a very, very famous African American woman who had the courage to get on a bus and not sit in the back of the bus. I know. How many of you actually have heard about Rosa Parks? Well, that's good. Great. So that's good. In any event, this story it was written about by a young guy whose mother played the Sissy Spacek character. His mother was the character based on the Sissy Spacek character. And, she had her maid, and, she wanted to get, it was a very interesting story to me because it was pretty straightforward. It was about working class people. I'm interested in working class people. Those are the films I make. If you look at The Idolmaker or Officer and a Gentleman or any of the films, Ray or La Bamba, or any of the films I've made, they're about working class people because that's who, I am. My mother was a waitress. So I liked this script. I read it, and it was, a housewife who had a maid, and the bus system was stuck, and she needed to get her maid to come and clean the house. Now, we can talk about whether it's right to have maids or not have maids or all that stuff, but I thought this story was really interesting because it was a woman's story, number one. At that time, not very many women's stories were being made. Two, it was about a housewife and a maid who were interrelated. And although the maid came to the house every day, the housewife had no idea where she lived, had no idea about her family, had no idea about anything. And this whole situation to me sounded dramatic. And the screenwriter who had written the script, he said this is a story that actually happened in Montgomery, Alabama. So to me, it was important that the film be shot in Montgomery. It was shot many years later, so it was a period picture. We had to make sure it looked like Montgomery in that era, and that's kind of how it all came about. So that's the first kind of memory. It's a process that's interesting because I'm going to just go through it. I know you probably all know this, but since we're talking about a specific project, you have to kind of discuss it and in specifics. And I think in this instance, what it is about is this. You find a script, you develop it a little bit. I had the money. Luckily, I had the money to make the film because I had this little studio and I had I had enough money to make 5 films. That's very unusual. As you start developing things and you have projects of your own that you're going to take out, the big deal is going to be, how do I get the money to make this picture? It's harder and harder, but you know what? It's always been hard. It's always been, let's call it almost impossible. But if you have the passion and you have the experience and the drive to push, and you got a good project, chances are you're going to get it made. And that's the great thing. That's the good thing. And that's why I'm here. Anyway, I've done that myself in my career. This was a weird instance when I had the money to make a picture, and then I had to find the filmmakers to climb on board. When you are the person that's making the picture and you want the money, or you're the person that has the script and the studio and has the money and wants to make the picture, you still start at the same place. Once you've got your script, you've got to get a filmmaker, a director, in other words, my normal job, but I was producing. And you've got to cast the movie. You've got to cast actors to play the roles in the script that you have developed. It's a big deal, and you want to make sure, because the way it used to be with feature films, everything has changed, and I'm sure you guys are well aware that the whole concept of a film like The Long Walk Home it would be almost impossible to make it today because movies don't go out and play in theaters like this. Everything is streaming today. And the feature films that are made are films that are big tentpole movies. They're made from comic books. They're made by Marvel. They're made by whoever's going to make a gigantic special effects movie. And I'm going to digress here because all these things are related, but they're really important for you because you're going to be going out and trying to make, films. The old world of feature films is dying. I hate to say it because that was my world. But, how many of you still go to the movie theaters every week?
One person, one person,
Oh,
Taylor.
God. How many of you go to the movie theater and see feature films once a month?
There's a few
Well, that's
more.
better. How many every 6 months? That's everybody. Yeah? I mean, bottom line is, it used to be a class of college students like this. There would be 100% of the people raising their hands saying they go to the movie theaters on a regular basis. It doesn't happen anymore. You watch streaming on, your tube, on your phone even. And that's a reality. So what you have to do at this point is focus yourself
So much better here.
on how you're going to get your films made. And that means how you're going to get them financed. And whatever entity that is, whether it's Warner Brothers, whether it's Sony, whether it's Paramount, or whether it's Netflix or Amazon, those are the new players. You're going to have to do it. And most likely, and this is a funny thing, you're going to need a filmmaker. Well, maybe you'll be the filmmaker. Maybe you'll be the director. But you're going to need a filmmaker who knows what he or she are doing and can really make the film. However, that's not going to sell the movie. What's going to sell the movie are the actors in it. And that doesn't change from when I was making films for theaters or today when you're making films for Netflix. They want to have people who are recognizable on the screen. And it will be incumbent upon you, if you say you have a great script, you're taking it out saying, I want to make this film and I want you to finance it. One of the first things they're going to say is, well, who's in it? And if you say nobody, you'll watch their face fall. And they won't be that interested. I hate to tell you that, but it's true. Now, there is, at the very beginning, when you're making a film for $3.95, you will have unknowns in it. And hopefully you can make a short film that will cement your reputation, which helps you when you're going out and you say, I want to direct a film. And they said, have you ever directed before? And you say, yeah, I did this 30-minute film. I did that. I did a 30-minute film that won an Academy Award. And that was my ticket. That was my calling card. I went into people and said, hey, I just won an Academy Award for a dramatic short. And they did pay attention to me. But if you're just going out yourself and and even if you have a short film, you're going to need to have a casting list of people that could play the roles in your script. And I did the same thing. And I had an agency in Hollywood. I'd made a lot of films. And I knew the agency, and I knew who was represented. I chose Sissy Spacek and Whoopi Goldberg. They were both represented. They both had done, well, Sissy Spacek, started with Carrie and she actually she went before Carrie, to Terry Malick's film. But anyway, she's a wonderful actress. Whoopi, who started as a comedian, had started to do feature films. And I thought they fit this very well. And it's interesting about Whoopi as a comedian is before she had done dramatic work. But, comedians can be very good actors. They can be serious actors. Robin Williams was a very good serious actor. People can do this even though they've made their reputation and their bread and butter telling jokes. And it so happened that they were represented by two different agents at CAA. CAA is still a very big agency in Hollywood. I went there, I talked to the agents, I gave them the script. They gave them to their clients. Their clients liked them. And as a producer, I packaged Long Walk Home, meaning I got Sissy Spacek and Whoopi Goldberg to say they would star in the movie. The director didn't do this, I did it. And that's oftentimes a job that a producer does. A producer develops material and then tries to cast it, and then either hires a director, or a director's been on board, but the producer is the one that kind of goes out and does that. Well, that's what I did with this film. And with those two women, I felt comfortable financing it and getting it going. The director had come with the script. He was a very good cinematographer and someone I knew. But cinematographers are not that hip when it comes to working with actors. They were around actors their entire life. They shoot actors, but do they know how to work with actors? That's a big if, and it's a very interesting thing. And there's a dramatic story about The Long Walk Home, which I will tell you in a while. But right now, the point is I got the two actors. We had a director. We then went down to, and I got a good, I was the executive producer. I was the head of the studio. So although I kind of fulfilled the function of casting the movie, I hired a very good producer named Hawk Koch. He produced my first movie. I knew he could produce a movie. And actually he hired, Itsi Atkins, who's standing there in front of you, as the associate producer and as the production manager. And I'm sure he's told you what the nuts and bolts of actually making a film are. Itzi understands it very well, and so did Hawk. Hawk had started his career as an assistant director. He worked on sets for directors. He worked on a lot of great movies, Chinatown, a lot of great movies that you would know. And he then worked his way up to become a producer. Itzi has worked on a lot of films also and has learned the nuts and bolts of filmmaking, which is basically supporting the director in their vision, putting it all together and making sure every day when you go out, your crew is there, you've got your locations lined up, you've got everything you need to make a film, and it's very hard. And then their job is to manage it and make sure that you every day get your day. You only have a certain amount of budget. If you run over and you don't get your whatever material you set up for that day, you're in big trouble if you're a director, because you're behind and you're over budget, and the heat will come down like an avalanche of fire on you. And that's not bullshit. There's no bullshit. And I'll explain to you about that in a minute. But anyway, that process, we went down to Montgomery. We had cast several of the roles in Hollywood, but we also cast locally. We tried to find actors in the South or bit players in the South who could fulfill various roles. And we started looking for locations, which we found, because this picture was mostly a location picture. We weren't going to build all of our sets in a studio and go outside for a few exterior shots. This was going to be shot on site. If you're going to go down to Montgomery, you better put Montgomery in the movie. And that's how I felt. So that's the process of kind of getting, we haven't even started shooting yet, but that's the process of getting there and what you have to do. So at this point, James and Itz, what do you want to do? Do you want to answer questions now, or do you want me to just keep going?
Well, the first thing I want to do is to give you a round of applause, as well as Itzi, for joining us here.
Yeah. And,
Thank you.
And do you want to cut the questions?
well, you're right, Taylor. I mean, that was a location movie, and but the Montgomery people, the extras, everything, they all came out for us, supported us, worked for the fees that we're offering, and the movie is still relevant after 30 years.
The thing is that I thought the story was really compelling, and I think that the two women were especially good in their roles. I mean, really good. They were believable. I mean, Whoopi, who's very urban, and she's like playing somebody from the South. She still, I think, acquitted herself beautifully. And the other people in the movie, Ving Rhames, a lot of people in the movie are really great actors. But then we had, it's interesting. The movie itself, had some very interesting people. There's a very famous gospel singer named Dorothy Love Coates. And if any of you have how many people have ever heard of Dorothy Love Coates? Anybody? Oh, that's great. Fantastic. Well, Dorothy Love Coates was one of the great gospel singers of all time. And she was from Alabama. And the composer that I had hired, who was English, fell in love. I took him to Jazz Fest in New Orleans, and Dorothy Love Coates sang there, and he decided to base his score around her and her choir and so forth. So we had some really interesting people from Alabama who were incredibly talented, who were in this movie also. She was in the movie, and she sang in the movie, which I think was something very special. I mean, when you're putting together a movie, it's not just Sissy and Whoopi. It's the other actors. It's the bit players. It's the people in the church. It's the extras. It's obviously the crew. And I think the thing that happened here, and it was very interesting, the director of the movie, I said, had been a cinematographer. He really understood how to shoot a film. He got, as the cinematographer, a man named Roger Deakins. Roger Deakins is English. He has subsequently become probably, if not the most famous, one of the most famous cinematographers in Hollywood, winning the Academy Award, nominated for I don't know how many Oscars. He was great. And this was his first film in America. So crew-wise, we had some great people. Spike Lee's brother, who now is directing films, was on the picture. So you put together a group of people who are all talented and have to work as a unit. And then you go about your daily process of trying to get that film done for the budget that it's been budgeted for, which is very hard. You have to have things like weather cover, which I told you before, most of this picture was shot in Montgomery. All of it was shot in Montgomery. A lot of exteriors. When you're in exterior and you start, let's say you start a sequence and it starts to rain, and it's going to rain for the rest of the day, you can't continue. Because if you started the scene in sunshine, you have to start again in the rain, and if it wasn't designed for the rain, you've got to run for cover. And so Itzi would set up cover sets. They would be small interiors in probably real locations that we could jump to if the weather stopped us from shooting outside. These are all things that are very crucial in the logistics of making films. People who make films know them all the time. You may know it, you may not. But the moment you start working in production, you learn it really quickly. You got to think ahead. You're shooting, you say, tomorrow we're doing this, unless the wind's blowing, or unless it's thunder and lightning, or unless it's pouring rain, at which point we move to A, B, or C. And the crew has to be ready to do that. The person in Itzi's position, who's kind of the nuts and bolts, person, the production manager, making sure that happens, he's the guy that has to make sure that, like, for instance, we're moving into and think about what that means. We're going to take somebody's house in Montgomery, and we're going to shoot there. Well, do we leave the family in it for a while until we're ready to in the schedule, or do we move them out to a motel early and dress the house so it's covered? You dress it. The answer is you move them out, pay the money for the hotel, and dress the house, because you never know when you're going to need it. Even though you say, I'm not going to shoot in here for 3 weeks, if it rains 5 days in a row, you may have to go in that house and shoot. And you can't move the family out at that point and redress it with period furniture. These are all little bits and pieces that happened to us in Montgomery. So I think Itzi can help you there.
Yeah, we're going to have a few questions now, if you don't mind.
Great.
Jonathan, you want to come? They're itching to ask some questions here. You can see yourself on the screen too, so get to where you can see you.
Is this good right here?
Yeah, it's good.
All right. My question, we've been talking about The Long Walk Home, and you mentioned La Bamba, great film, and Ray and stuff like that. So all three of these are period films. And so what kind of draws you guys to do period pieces, and what would you say is kind of your biggest challenges in doing films that are not, today, set in today's time?
It's first of all, that's a really good question. The first order of business, if you're doing a period film, and of course the story is period, you have to do it, it's going to affect your budget. If you just, you guys are all dressed contemporary, right? If I'm making a film as contemporary, you could probably get up and walk into that film and you'd look absolutely right. But none of you look right for a film set in the late 1950s. Your hair is wrong, your clothes are wrong, your shoes are wrong, the furniture's wrong, everything is wrong. And that means that you have to design the picture. And there's a person we haven't mentioned, which is the production designer, who is in charge of the look of the picture, in charge of the sets. And then there's the costume designer, who is in charge of the costumes. And then there's the set decorator, who's in charge of the furniture. And then there's the transportation coordinator, because when you go outside, the first thing you got to do is make sure you shoot on streets in Montgomery where those houses were there in 1958. The new parts of town, you can't go to. You've got to find all your locations that fit the period. And then the transportation coordinator needs to find cars from 1958 or 57 or whenever it is, or before. You can't have 1970 cars because they won't work. And the audience is very hip. They're going to say, well, this is a really amateurish film. I just saw a 1984 car go by in a 1958 movie. Don't work. So it's a really good question. It means that you all have to, when I say you all, I mean all your collaborators. All your collaborators have to do their research. Research is crucial. And I want to mention, let me just start from the top. The script is passed around and it's broken down. Every department head gets it, so the production designer gets it. And the production designer understands, I've got to find this era of house, this era of neighborhood, this era of church, all the things that are in the piece. Even the streets, if the streets don't look the same way they did then, and I'm not talking about worn down, I just meant, if the asphalt is not the same, or, they've got parking meters up that are modern, you can't do that.
And we graveled some streets.
Yeah, the production designer is going to think that. The next person that's going to think about it is the set decorator. That's the person that's going to put the furniture in, the TVs, all period, everything period. The next person is a costume designer, who either has to go out to secondhand thrift stores and buy clothes from that era, or go to a costume house and rent costumes that fit that era, or talk to the extras and say, will you please go up in your attic? Does your aunt or uncle or grandfather have any clothes? This is really what happens, and your budget is affected. If you don't have the money to pay for all these things, you shouldn't be doing a period movie. And it goes all the way down the line. The prop person, you guys know what a prop person is?
Oh, yeah.
James right now is holding the microphone. That's a prop. That's a prop, okay? It's a hand prop. A gun is a hand prop. Anything that's not tied down that you sit on, or a piece of furniture, is a prop. A pitcher and glasses, plates and dishes, they have to fit the period too. So, and like I said, transportation coordinator has to get cars. So all of that stuff has to do with making a film this period.
We've got some other questions here for you. Go ahead.
Great.
So it's so loud. So obviously the film industry is like a lot harder to get into. It's not just a hospital where you could go apply if you're a nurse. So do you guys have like really good advice on how to make connections within the industry, like as young as we are?
What you do is the first thing you do when, let's say you're going to go on location. I mean, I certainly have my connections in the industry. That's how I got the picture made, and that's because I'd made several successful movies. You make several successful movies, people take a chance and give you money. But when you go to Montgomery, the first thing you do is you check in with the State Film Commission. Now, many commissions are, most states have film commissions. Some of them are really good. Some of them are pretty piss poor. You guys just happen to be in a state where you've got one of the biggest, film industries in the United States. And the Film Commission in Georgia is kick-ass. It really is. It has been for a long time. I'll tell you an interesting story, just an aside. Long Walk Home was made in Alabama. And we went to the Film Commission there, and they were able to help us. But, we had to. The story took place in Montgomery. We had to shoot it there. I made a film called Ray about the life of Ray Charles, which was a period movie. Ray wanted it made in Georgia because Ray is a favorite son of Georgia. And Georgia on My Mind by Ray Charles is the state song. So I went to Georgia. I met with the Film Commission. They were terrific, but at the time, Georgia was in no man's land. The Republican governor had come in and said, there's no way that I'm going to give those assholes in Hollywood any government money. And at that time, nothing was being made in Atlanta or Georgia per se, unless it was unusual and everything came from Hollywood. But there was no, Atlanta had an office of the IA. You know what the IA is? The International Brotherhood of, it's the union for all the film unions, cinematographers, editors, grips, lighting, etc. It also, Atlanta had a regional headquarters of SAG, the Screen Actors Guild. So it had been a production center, but this governor had destroyed all that, and all those offices had moved. So I did not make Ray in Georgia like Ray Charles wanted me to. I made it in Louisiana because Louisiana had a film incentive. And one thing that the Film Commission in Georgia asked me to do is to say, we won't be able to do anything until this governor's out, but will you prepare a report for both the joint houses of the legislature in Georgia, telling them that $31 million would have come into the Georgia economy if, in fact, there had been support and been an incentive. And I think based on...
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, as we know, the rest is history. Isn't that true?
The rest is history. Georgia then turned around and look where you are today. But these things are really important. So go ahead.
We've got one more question, time for one more question. Go ahead.
For someone who has never worked on a film or made their own film before, what would be your first piece of advice to becoming a filmmaker or just working in the industry in general?
Well, let me just tell you this, because all of us have started from nowhere, and we're going to go to a film set. For me, as I told you before, I worked on educational films. I did whatever. What you got to do is, it doesn't matter what you do. As I said, it'll probably be a gopher. You may be going for coffee for the producer, or you may be going for, hauling film cans. Of course, there's no film anymore. It's all digital. But you may be hauling something around for the camera department. You may be helping transportation. Whatever it is, honestly, I can tell you it is not changed, and it will never change. People in the film business, it's the circus, okay? If you're a circus person, and by the way, there's a lot of things that you can do in the movie business. You may decide to be in marketing and advertising. So you're never on a set. All you do is wait for the film to be finished, and then you try to market it, and you try to advertise it. You may work in post-production. You may never go out to a set. You may be in an editing room, and you're putting together all the footage that has come in that's been shot. All these are viable. You may be in the music side, and you never go to a set. You just are on the sound stage where you record the music for the film. There's all these wonderful parts of filmmaking that I think are really exciting and creative.
That's such a wonderful spot to stop.
Wait.
Oh,
Let me just answer the last bit here.
Okay,
the last
gotcha.
bit is this. The last bit is this. Whatever job you take, you better walk in ready to impress people by how hard you work, how long you work, and how little you complain.
Yeah, the 3 Ps.
Taylor,
Because
thank you.
Everybody that's a film professional is watching and saying, this person will never do it. All they do is bitch and moan. If you go in and just say, I'm here until the last person goes home, and impresses them, and the next time they say, I'm bringing that person back. That's probably the best piece of advice I can give you.
That's your reputation. Thank you so
Thanks
much,
again.
Taylor. Thank you.